The Führerbunker, a subterranean complex beneath Berlin, served as Adolf Hitler's final command post during the closing months of World War II. This bunker, constructed to protect Nazi leaders from the relentless Allied bombings, is historically significant as the backdrop to the final days of the Third Reich. Here, Hitler and his inner circle, isolated from the collapsing front lines, faced impending defeat. The Führerbunker symbolizes the terminal phase of Nazi Germany, where desperation, delusion, and chaos conspired in shaping a dramatic conclusion to a devastating war. Understanding the Führerbunker is crucial in grasping the magnitude of Hitler's last stand. Within its oppressive confines, decisions were made not only out of strategic desperation, but also from a place of profound psychological breakdown. The significance of this locus of command becomes evident when considering the bunker as an emblem of the collapse of a tyrannical regime, illustrating how absolute power crumbled under the unyielding pressure of advancing Allied forces. Two poignant examples highlight this reality. Firstly, the Führerbunker witnessed Hitler's final address to his generals, a tirade filled with delusional optimism, contradicting the bleak military situation outside. Secondly, it was within these walls that Hitler married Eva Braun and, shortly after, committed suicide. These events underscore the bunker as a stage for the moral and strategic unraveling of Nazi leadership. Opinions differ regarding the Führerbunker's role in history. Some historians view it as a tomb for the Nazi ideology, while others see it as a stark reminder of the depths of human hubris. Critics argue whether the narratives emerging from the bunker absolve certain figures of responsibility, through a focus on chaos and inevitability rather than deliberate and continued atrocity. Controversies surround the Führerbunker, particularly regarding the myths and legends that have grown around it over the decades. Some argue that its depiction in popular media has sensationalized the events, diverting focus from broader war crimes. Further debates arise from the limited documentation and reliance on survivor accounts, which can be fragmented and biased. The Führerbunker is intricately connected to the broader narrative of Nazi Germany's downfall. It represents both a physical and symbolic bastion that ultimately failed, influencing how history perceives Hitler's final decisions. Understanding this location provides insight into the psychological state of the Nazi leadership, highlighting the transition from a militaristic regime to historical infamy, forever altering the trajectory of European history. Life inside the Führerbunker during Hitler's last days was a microcosm of the chaos and despair that marked the final chapter of the Third Reich. This underground shelter, situated beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, served as the last refuge for Adolf Hitler and his inner circle as Allied forces closed in on the city in April 1945. Daily life in the bunker was characterized by a stark contrast between the surreal attempts to maintain a semblance of normalcy and the grim reality of a crumbling regime. Those inside the bunker experienced claustrophobic confinement, limited resources, and the constant anxiety of impending defeat. Understanding the bunker's conditions is crucial in appreciating the psychological toll on its occupants and the desperate decisions made during this period. As the nerve center for Hitler's military operations, the bunker was where critical and ultimately disastrous decisions were made, reflecting the delusion and paranoia that gripped the Nazi leadership. Two specific examples illustrate life within the bunker. First, the daily meetings and military briefings continued despite the dire circumstances, with Hitler often refusing to abandon plans that had long since become untenable. This illustrates a detachment from reality that permeated the bunker. Second, the personal lives of those inside, including the marriage of Hitler and Eva Braun and subsequent suicides, highlight the sense of fatalism and impending doom that overshadowed any semblance of ordinary life. Opinions from historians often support the idea that the Führerbunker was a microcosm of the Third Reich's end. the isolation and insulation from the outside reality. Within the bunker mirror the delusions of grandeur and eventual downfall of the Nazi regime. This setting provides a poignant backdrop to Hitler's last days, offering insight into his psyche and that of his followers. However, there are challenges and controversies in interpreting these events. Some argue that focusing too much on the bunker's internal dynamics risks oversimplifying or creating a mythologized narrative that detracts from the broader historical context, including the immense suffering caused by the war. The life inside the bunker connects to the larger context of Hitler's last stand, as it illustrates the collapse of Nazi leadership and the inevitable defeat of the regime. The decisions made within those confined walls had far-reaching consequences, influencing military strategies and the ultimate fate of those loyal to Hitler. Understanding the atmosphere in the bunker provides valuable insights into how desperation and delusion influenced the endgame of World War II in Europe. The psychological state of Hitler and his inner circle during the final days of World War II, particularly in the Führerbunker, offers a compelling exploration of the intense unraveling of the Nazi regime. As the Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, Adolf Hitler, once seen as a formidable leader by his followers, descended into paranoia, delusion, and despair. His inner circle, composed of high-ranking Nazi officials and loyal followers, mirrored this deteriorating mental state, creating an atmosphere of deep-seated chaos and desperation. Understanding the psychological state of Hitler and his inner circle is crucial to comprehending the final moments of the Third Reich. The Führerbunker became a microcosm of the broader collapse of Nazi Germany, reflecting not only military defeat, but also the psychological disintegration of its leadership. These conditions contributed to a series of irrational decisions by Hitler and his close aides, such as the refusal to surrender and the insistence on fighting until the bitter end, which ultimately led to unnecessary casualties and suffering. One vivid example was Hitler's constant rejections of reality, issuing orders to divisions that no longer existed and promoting officers like Ferdinand Schorner, who lacked the means to execute their missions effectively. Another example includes the delusional optimism exhibited by Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda, who remained steadfast in his belief in an ultimate German victory, planning counteroffensives with non-existent resources, and rallying the Berlin population even as the city crumbled around them. Many historians and psychologists have offered insights into this psychological decline. Ian Kershaw, a prominent historian, suggests that Hitler's growing isolation and detachment from reality accelerated his mental deterioration. This viewpoint highlights the fragility of a regime whose power was centralized in the persona of an increasingly unstable leader. However, this perspective does come with challenges. Some argue that emphasizing Hitler's mental state can divert focus from the systemic and ideological underpinnings of Nazi atrocities, potentially absolving or diminishing the responsibility of others in the regime. Alternative viewpoints stress the need to consider these psychological elements alongside a broader analysis of Nazi administrative and military failures. The psychological disintegration within the Führerbunker not only encapsulates the end of the Nazi regime, but also provides insight into how leadership under extreme duress can influence decision-making processes. It connects directly to the chaotic military strategies employed in the war's final days and the eventual downfall of Hitler's empire. Understanding this psychological collapse is critical for a nuanced view of the last chapter of World War II, illustrating the profound impact of leadership psychology on historical events. The concept of military decisions and dilemmas, the final days of the Third Reich, refers to the complex, often desperate, strategic choices and moral quandaries faced by Adolf Hitler and his military commanders as the Nazi regime crumbled in the closing weeks of World War II. These decisions were made under the immense pressure of imminent defeat, with the Soviet army encroaching on Berlin and Allied forces advancing from the west. In the claustrophobic confines of the Führerbunker, Hitler and his closest advisors grappled with whether to fight on or surrender and how to conduct military operations with rapidly dwindling resources. This topic is significant within the broader narrative of Hitler's last stand, the untold chaos in the Führerbunker, because it highlights the disarray and disintegration of Nazi leadership at a pivotal moment in history. The military decisions made during these final days not only determined the fate of the Third Reich, but also profoundly impacted post-war Europe, including decisions about how cities would be defended or abandoned, and how civilian populations were treated. Real-world examples include the decision to launch the so-called Battle of Berlin, a futile effort to defend the city against the overwhelming Soviet forces, which resulted in massive civilian casualties and urban destruction. Another example is Hitler's refusal to allow a strategic withdrawal or surrender, which prolonged the conflict unnecessarily and increased suffering on both sides. Supporters of these choices might argue that they were made out of a misplaced sense of loyalty or a duty, or an unwillingness to face the reality of defeat. However, this perspective is highly controversial given the catastrophic human cost and the ethical implications of prolonging the war. Challenges associated with this topic include differing interpretations of the motives behind these decisions and the extent to which they were driven by Hitler's deteriorating mental state, his ideological fanaticism, or pressure from other Nazi officials. Some historians suggest alternative viewpoints, such as the notion that certain commanders acted out of fear or self-preservation rather than ideological commitment. These military decisions and dilemmas interconnect with other aspects of the chaos within the Führerbunker, illustrating the atmosphere of paranoia, betrayal, and despair that characterized Hitler's last days. They reflect broader themes of leadership, power, and the consequences of totalitarian rule, thus providing a deeper understanding of both the individual and collective failures that led to the Nazi regime's downfall.